Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 193. On this episode of the podcast, Jen speaks with Dr. Lynn Marie Morski on why quitting is the most undervalued tool in your career toolbox. Personally, I found quitting a very effective tool to prevent being fired.
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast with me, Jen Swanson, the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. I quit once. I really quit, not in a planned kind of way, but in a I am so done with this kind of way. I had been hired by a chiropractor right out of college, out of the training for the healthcare work that I had done. And it wasn't a good fit. It wasn't what I'd been trained to do. It wasn't what I wanted. I'd gotten on at a hospital a couple of days a week, and I had 3 or 4 days in the rest of the week that I could work. And this person hired me rather than a number of other people he could have hired. And I was not qualified. I didn't know how to run a doctor's office. I didn't know how to do the filing. I couldn't type as quickly as he wanted. And I was trained for a day and a half by his receptionist, his regular person, who then took off for 3 weeks on a Hawaiian vacation and was not able to be reached to answer questions. So you can imagine that I was stressed out. It was challenging. I was left all by myself at a desk in an office to run it while he was in the back treating patients. And it was really not a good situation. And on top of that, I was expected to pay his visa bill, to buy flowers for his wife, to organize his travel itinerary, and then he kept criticizing my posture every time he came out of the room. And honestly, by the Friday, I had had enough. And he was making murmurings about bringing back one of the other candidates who had applied for the job just to see how she might work out on the Monday when I was working at my other job. And so that was it. On the Friday at 5:00, I got up and I got all my stuff and I said to him, well, I really hope that person you're bringing in on Monday works out because I'm not coming back. I expect my paycheck in the mail and thank you very much. Well, he was absolutely stunned and furious, but I walked out of there and I felt amazing because it was so free to not be trapped in this situation that was just absolutely the wrong fit, that I wasn't ready for, I wasn't trained for, and I wasn't having any fun at, that's for sure. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever quit? And what has that felt like to you? My guest today is Dr. Lynn Marie Morski. She knows how to quit in a good way. She's a medical doctor, still practicing. She's a lawyer and she's a podcaster, and she spends a lot of time helping people learn how to quit strategically. My first question to her is, why are people so afraid to quit? Hear what she says right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jen, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to careersbyjen.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jen, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit careersbyjen.com after this podcast.
So, Lynn Marie Morski, I'm going to start right off the top with a question. Why are people so reticent to quit?
That's a fantastic question. Great place to start, because that's my entire purpose in life, seems to be to destigmatize quitting. And a lot of it comes from one very particular phrase. And there are two people that I believe have been cited as the origin of this. One is Napoleon Hill, and the other one is, I believe, a football coach whose name I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But it's the whole winners never quit and quitters never win mantra that is great for sports and not much else. I often say that the only place that quitters don't win is if you're running a marathon. Like if your goal is to win the Boston Marathon and you're quitting the Boston Marathon halfway through, yes, that phrase absolutely applies. You will not be the winner. But in so many other areas of life, it takes quitting to end up feeling in your own, success and your own happiness in life like a winner.
Now, to me, it takes courage to quit in some instances.
It takes courage to quit in many, many instances because there's a whole lot of fears that are involved, like especially depending on what you quit. If it's a high-powered job, well, what are people going to think about me giving up this high-powered job and leaving? Am I crazy? Shouldn't I just be fortunate to have this job? Or a marriage, people have all kinds of thoughts of you quitting a marriage if there's kids or whatever else. Lots of things people have their fears about quitting because of society's pressures. But at the end of the day, who's the one who has to live with your life and your decisions? It's just you.
And that's the thing, too. There's so many people have so much advice, right? There's so much advice coming at you from every angle. And yet, in the end, you're with you.
Yeah, that's it. And it's great that people try to give you advice, but they're not living your life. They don't have the same background set of circumstances. They don't even have like the same neural connections. Like their brain fires one way, your brain fires another way. What lights them up is not necessarily what lights you up. So, advice can be helpful, but it should never be forceful. And a lot of people kind of try to force advice. No, you should definitely not leave that job. And I think, a lot of times people experience that type of pressure more in a family situation where parents think they know what's best for the kids. But even in that situation, you don't know what's going in your kids' heads because you're not them.
Right. And you're not there. You're not in that particular situation that has to be lived through.
Exactly.
When it gets to that point, right?
Right. And living through, that's a great phrase because I don't want to just like survive in life. I don't want to just be alive. I want to be living and vital and thriving. And living through is just the opposite of that. That's just like tolerating a life. And you were given one life. Who says that, okay, your job is now until you're 80 to just tolerate it? I mean, that's not how I view my job in life. I believe, wow, this is a gift. My job is to enjoy it.
Now, this idea of quitting became a bit of a revelation to you, is my understanding. Can you tell us about that?
Well, if I look back on my life, I've been quitting since, say, like fourth grade. I've never had qualms about it. It's come very easily to me, but it wasn't something that I sat there and thought like, oh, I'm really great at quitting. But
sounds so funny.
Yeah, most people would not want to think that about themselves. I'm such a good quitter because frankly, in our society, they would be like, what a loser. Like nobody should be proud of that. But I recall this is getting into like maybe medical school residency type years that I started developing thoughts about quitting and reasons why when people would say, why are you quitting this thing you've already dedicated such and such to? Like, for example, I quit my graduate school career. I was a multimedia designer and I decided, okay, I'm going to go and get like a graduate degree in interactive media. And I quit that halfway through. And so there are people saying, what about the time that you've invested? What about the money you've invested? And my answer to them was per the sunk cost fallacy, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time. But I said, so your advice is to spend more time and more money on a thing I already don't like? Like, where's the logic in that one? And I had always thought things like that. And once I was driving I live in San Diego, to LA, playing podcast after podcast, and one comes on and it's an episode of Freakonomics from 2011. It's called The Upside of Quitting. And in that episode, they talk about that exact same scenario and they put that name to it. They said, this is the sunk cost fallacy. And I was like, it was like, there's a name for this thing that I've thought my entire life. And so at that point, I remember like I couldn't get out of my head for days. There were two concepts they discussed. One was the sunk cost fallacy and one was opportunity cost. And that's the like, okay, yeah, if you stick it out in grad school for another year, that's going to keep you away from the opportunity to do anything else that you'd rather be doing. And, like when I quit grad school, that next month or so, I started my pre-med studies. So like that would have postponed everything I would have done for another year. You can't always do two things at once. Generally, you can't effectively do a lot of things all at the same time.
Dang.
And yeah, I know, right? sorry to break that to y'all, but but so I went through law school and I had to give a speech at graduation. And I thought, like, what can I say to this group of people? They're about to embark on a career that, frankly, a lot of people don't enjoy. Like, a lot of people go into law because it's secure, and it's almost any major can lead to law school. So no matter what you did, if you're like, oh, whatever else, I'll go to law school, right? So they may not have always had this drive to be a lawyer, and they may get out and they may hate it. And I thought, like, what's the most valuable piece of information I could get these people in these 7 minutes I have to talk to them? And something just came over me and said, like, tell them to quit. Tell them that quitting's okay, and tell them your story, because I didn't get to be a doctor and a lawyer by starting off at 18. Like, I'm going to be a doctor and a lawyer. Like, at 18, I thought I was a broadcast journalism major. And at 20, I was a multimedia designer. Like, there were a ton of quits along the way. And so that's kind of where the revelation all came. But it is a revolution too. I'm just going to go ahead and that was a Freudian slip, but this is the quitting revolution.
And so there are benefits then. There's obviously been benefits for you in your career path, in your life. And what are some of the benefits, the key benefits that you would distill from all of this?
I'd say freedom. That's my one word credo for life. And I think a lot of us, if we boil down what keeps us from being happy, it's areas in which we don't feel free. And for a lot of us, that's okay. We have maybe a boss that's overbearing, or we're in a relationship where the person is trying to control us, or we're in a city that has kept us trapped because it has maybe like a small town mindset, anything like that. So in careers, if you're in a career where you're feeling totally trapped because it's, maybe it started off working for you, but there are many things that can go wrong. It could be, like I said, maybe the boss and you don't get along. Maybe it's your coworkers and you. Maybe you just get tired of doing whatever initially did light you up, but you're like, man, it's been 10 years. I've been doing the same thing. I need a new challenge. Whatever it is, you should feel the freedom to say, hey, this is no longer working for me. I don't care if on LinkedIn it's going to say, I was only at this job for 3 months, 8 months. Like, I realize that's a legitimate concern, but you've got to put your own health and well-being first. And if you're in some job that is giving you anxiety because you know that the next day you're going to go in and you're going to get a bad performance report and you can't sleep because you had 12 bad discussions with coworkers that day, it's not worth your health to just have a better looking resume or a better looking LinkedIn profile. You should have the freedom to move about in careers and know that that's not like you failed at one career. There's no like handbook that you're given when you're 18 that says, okay, I've met you. This is what you're going to like doing and be good at for the next 60 years. We don't have that. And so we have to just kind of pivot back and forth. We try one thing. Okay, maybe that doesn't work. We pivot a little bit, go a different direction. And those little quits along the way is how we figure out what we do like doing by eliminating the things we don't.
So freedom is one of the main benefits. And freedom, but what are some of the objections that people have for themselves in because I would imagine that it would be a scary prospect if someone says, "Why don't you just quit if it's paining you so much?"
It is. And I'll specify at this point that what I advocate in my podcast and my book and coaching and speaking is strategic quitting, which to me is the opposite of like spontaneous quitting, or what I like to call like up and quitting. That I work at, I'm a physician and I still work 2 days a week at the VA. And one of my colleagues, surprisingly, another, physician up and quit one day. And that that's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about doing something that's going to put you in like some financial dire straits or have you out on the street. What I'm advocating is when you realize that something isn't working for you, to start taking steps to making that quit, because there is something else out there for you. You may, like, especially in this economy with technology and all those things, you can find some strange niches of the internet to make money, like whatever you're passionate about. If there's something that like you're super passionate about, there's probably a way for you to make money from it. Heck, look at YouTube. Like, there's some strange ways people are making money, but that's the creativity it takes. And that starts by realizing, okay, I am not stuck in this job. I have the freedom to quit. Yes, there are oppositions. People will ask you why you're, wasting the time and money. For example, like in a law firm, I always think about this. If somebody's trying to make partner And they're like, okay, I'm 4 years into this law firm. And like, say at 5 years, you make partner, and that 4 years they're miserable. And somebody says, why would you quit now? You've already put in 4 years. If you put in just one more, you'll make partner. And I was like, if you're miserable at 4 years, are you going to be less miserable when your name's on the letterhead? No, but you're going to be exactly probably as miserable, if not more. But then the quitting is a lot harder when your name is on the letterhead and on the outside of the building, So sticking through something to reach these milestones just doesn't serve you. If the job isn't working for you now, don't up and quit, but start looking at ways that you can get your finances ready, get your relationships ready, and get your health ready to make a successful strategic quit.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you when you should not quit, if there is a situation in which you should definitely not quit. And we'll be right back.
You've updated your resume, you've sent it out, and you've been selected for an interview. Congratulations. And now you want to get ready, really ready. This is where Careers by Jen can help. We have a comprehensive online course called How to Ace a Job Interview When You Haven't Interviewed in a Long Time. This video-based course is jam-packed with information, advice, and exercises to help you get completely prepared to walk into an interview situation with confidence. From exactly what to prepare in advance, to how to answer common questions, to what questions you might ask the interviewer, and so much more, this course is designed to get you ready. Visit careersbyjen.com and click on Training Resources to see the curriculum, preview a couple of the introductory lessons, and see what others who have taken the course are saying about it. Visit careersbyjen.com and get ready to ace your next interview.
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast with Jen Swanson.
Okay, so we're back talking with Lynn Marie Morski, and the question I left off with is, when should you not quit?
And I have to tell you, Jen, you were the first person to ever ask me that question.
Really?
Yes. I've had it phrased as, in a non-career, more of a general aspect. How do you know when you need to make a quit and when you're just being lazy? That's what somebody else asked me on a different podcast. But I think, to kind of turn it around, to say when you shouldn't quit is in one of two situations. And one is that if instead of really needing to make a quit, you are just, we'll go ahead and call it being lazy, as this other person had phrased it to me. And the way you know which it is whether or not your body is telling you to quit. Because there's a voice in your head, and the voice in your head, we all know, is not necessarily our best friend, right? It can tell us negative things all day long. For some reason, it likes to do that, right? So if it's telling you, you're not good at this, you can't do a thing, you should stop trying, okay, that exists. But if you start to have insomnia or indigestion or migraines, or like I said, you're tossing and turning all night because of anxiety from a meeting you had or for a meeting you're about to have, that's your body telling you. And your body does have your best interest in mind. It's the one that isn't going to lie to you. Your head can, play little mind games. That's why they're called that, I think, on you all day, right? So if you're actually we go back to that marathon thing, if you're preparing for a marathon and you get up in the morning and, you're supposed to train that morning, you're like, oh man, this bed feels good. Like, I really wish I think I'm just going to quit training for this marathon. That might be you just being lazy and that voice in your head, On the other hand, if you're training for that marathon and you've gotten 16 injuries and you're super stressed out because the marathon training is taking your time away from your kids or your spouse, then that's a whole nother situation, if it's leading to a level of stress. So I'd say the first situation where you shouldn't quit is if it's just being lazy. And the second is not an absolute like that. The second is when you shouldn't quit immediately. And it's like I said before, I live on my own. I don't support anything but one very tiny succulent that I'm trying to keep alive. Nothing will die if I'm out on the street, maybe a little succulent. But there are plenty of people who have entire families, and I'd say if you're in that situation and you're responsible for more than just you can quit, but you just can't make impulsive quits. Because even on my show, I feature successful strategic quitters, and I featured more than one who made kind of an impulsive quit, but learned lessons from it and then have since, gone back and learned to quit more strategically, or you just learned something dramatic from that quit. So I still wanted to share it on the show. But do not make those impulsive quits if there are people who rely on you. Still say in your head, I realize I need to quit this thing, but make sure that your quit is strategic, that you've got everything in place so that, because I don't advocate quitting for the sake of quitting. I advocate quitting as a way to up-level your life. And if you don't make the preparations and you're going to down-level your life, then that's a situation which, you're right, I would say do not quit.
So what is a strategic quit?
As I said before, it's definitely not the like office space where you go in and burn the place down. It's where you where you decided. I never know what the demographic is and who's going to know office space, but I still quote it incessantly because it's genius. But it's such a great example of people who are miserable in their jobs. Like everybody in that show should have quit. But step one in strategic quitting is this tuning into your intuition, like I talked about. Like, is there something I need to quit? And strategic quitting is not only a thing you do, it's a framework you develop. So at this point in my life, I've been friends with strategic quitting for long enough that I'm super tuned in when something is out of alignment. And I can be like, hold it. Why did that thing just cause me more stress? And it takes me so much less time to realize, oh, there's a thing that needs to be quit. So number one is, having that intuition check, that gut check, like what's going on that keeps me from being in equanimity that maybe I need to quit. And step two is deciding exactly what needs to be quit, because quitting's not easy most of the time. Quitting your yoga membership maybe, but like most of them that are a little more involved, they take some steps. So you don't want to throw out everything if you don't have to. Don't quit your entire job if the only thing you don't like is your commute. Go into your boss, ask if you could work from home for a few days, or if you just don't like the department you're in, but it's a big company, ask if you could trade to a department you might like more, so that you're not doing an excessive amount of quitting and putting a whole lot more work on yourself. Decide exactly what aspect it is of whatever isn't working for you that needs to be quit. Maybe it is the whole thing, but if it's not, don't have sacrifice throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say. And step three in strategic quitting is to conquer any fears, like we talked about before, because you can't just, okay, I'm totally scared and then quit. Like that's not going to happen. You need to process through these fears, and you need to have these conversations with yourself. Like if your fear is what other people are going to think about you, have that conversation with yourself, or me or another quitting coach, if there are other quitting coaches out there, but to say, okay, who's the one who has to live with your decision at the end of the day? And how long do you think that other person is really going to think about your decision? If they're not related to you and they don't live in your house, probably not long. They have their own lives, So after you go through your fears, then you prepare the logistics, which is hugely important in a successful strategic quit. Like I said, you got to get your health in order, because you don't want to end up stressed, anxious, not eating, hair falling out because of this quit. You've got to get your health lined up. You've got to get your finances in order, and you've got to get your relationships in order, because a quit's going to be a lot easier if your partner and your family, whoever else, is on your side and supporting you. And the very last step is to quit in the way that leaves the door open if you ever want to walk back into it. You've got to preserve relationships and avoid burning any bridges if at all possible.
That's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially in the career world, you never know when it may not be that you want to go back to that career, but some financial thing happens, there's a fire, somebody totals your car, some reason that you have to go back to that career before re-quitting that career, as a stepping stone to whatever you want to do. Like, much better if you told your boss, like, hey, it's not the job. It's just right now, this is what I'm being called to do. You have a sit down discussion. You don't ruin that relationship. It's definitely advantageous in the future.
And the way that you quit probably has a direct effect on how good of a recommendation you get.
100%. There are so many reasons in the job arena. That's the most important one. Like if you quit your relationship guns blazing, like usually the new partner doesn't call the old partner like, hey, would you recommend this person? But in a job situation, that's absolutely what happens. And so that is, the number one reason. So even if you never want to walk back through that door, even if you want to peek into that door, ask for a letter of rec and walk back out, it's going to go much better if you've preserved that relationship.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about a friend of mine who was a lawyer, who did all the training to be a lawyer and went into family law, and realized he was married and they were having children, and realized that it was just too hard. It was gut-wrenchingly sad for him. And next thing you know, he thought about it a long time, I'm sure, and talked to his parents about it. But he ended up going into partnership with his father in their sign-making business. Completely unrelated.
Wow.
Nice. And I met him in a theater group we were in. And the only reason I knew he'd had a career in law is that we were doing some Halloween thing that involved a Dracula character, and he showed up in his lawyer robe.
Oh, wow.
And I said, wow, that's really, really nice. Where did you get that? And then he told the story. Oh, I used to be a lawyer.
Great. Oh, I'd love to talk to him.
It was too funny. But yeah, it was quite something. And he ended up having a long and happy experience, ending up taking over the business from his father when his father retired. But it was a much happier space for him to be inside. And so I can see it. It's so hard at the moment when you're going through it all, but then in retrospect, there must be some insight.
There's a ton of insight. And that's part of that's like the secret step 6 to strategic quitting, is the looking back and making sure you learn from it. Because that's another thing that, a concept that people bring up when they're giving you, this very helpful advice, is that, the time or money you spent in that career, that relationship, that city, whatever, is wasted. And I will say time and time again, if you learned nothing else but what you don't want in the next job, relationship, city, then it wasn't a waste. But you definitely do have to stop and realize what that thing was. At some point I was in a startup, and I remember getting into the startup. I thought, this is going to be the greatest thing ever because I don't have to go to an office. I can work from home. And that's what I thought I wanted. But then I realized the structure of the startup, where there was actually no money coming in for a very long time, and I had to kind of report to somebody else. I couldn't have all three of those things. Now when I'm doing my own thing, yeah, whether or not money comes in is up to me and I get to make my own schedule, but I'm not answering to another person. And I realized okay, that, I can't have it to where no money's coming in and I'm answering to another person. That duo of things is not kosher for me. And if I didn't stop and realize that, I'd be like, okay, what's the next startup I can go into, and I'd make that same mistake again.
It's a self-awareness thing. And do you prescribe some kind of an activity or something for somebody to sit down and take stock of their career as they go along? I mean, I often suggest people take themselves on a date, to a coffee shop or something where there's nobody else around, or if they can, go off on a retreat for a couple of days and just take stock of where they're at and what they want and what they're hoping for. And I just wondered if you had something you offer like that.
Well, I'm kind of annoying about the fact that when I meet people and they tell me what they do, I am psychoanalyzing their answer very closely. And if I can for a second detect that they're not super stoked about whatever it is, I'll ask the question do you love it? And then again, their answer is so telling, because if they don't love it, they're not going to be yeah, totally, And so then I'll, this is probably just random people on the street that I meet, these poor souls, but it's fascinating to me because I think a lot of people get in a mindset that quitting is not even an option. So it doesn't even enter their atmosphere. It's not something they think about at all. They're I have this job. It brings in money. So what if today is tomorrow is the next day and I'm not really lit up by it, going crazy. But to me, that's still kind of settling, because I think you should wake up jazzed every morning. And I'll eventually get to that question. It's what do you feel like when you wake up in the morning? The other day, I was going to record a podcast with somebody, and I was so excited about having this guest on, I couldn't sleep the night before. And that's the straight up old Disney World commercial. We're too excited to sleep. And I was I am just the luckiest person to have that feeling at all in a career setting. There's plenty of times you're I can't wait to go to actual vacation tomorrow, but I was just stoked to get up and interview this person. And so I just would advise people are you really excited to get up in the morning? Do you I did a friend out of nowhere. I happened to say how are you feeling when you wake in the morning? He's terrified. And I was whoa, okay, let's, why? And we can dig into that. And that's a lot of, because your first thought in the morning is not necessarily your a conscious thought. You just wake up with that, and if you wake up being oh man, Monday again, do you realize how much of your life is spent at a job? You should not feel that way you should not be super excited that it's Friday. Most of the day should be kind of cool. And I realize that's an ideal situation. And a lot of people are really far from that ideal, but I still think it's worth aiming for. And so if you're not at that ideal, I would say, okay, then let's look at your day. Where in your day do you feel this friction? What email goes off and your stomach sinks? That was what it was for me in the startup. Okay, when a work-related email notification would go off, my stomach would sink. If I'd be having a perfectly good day and all of a sudden I'm anxious, I'd be hold it, what caused that? And I would say, take stock of your day. Is it a certain task at work? Is it a certain person at work? Is it the commute? what is it that's making you not super excited to go to it? And then go from there, because it may not be that they have to throw out that much. They may not have to change or quit that much. Maybe these little changes could really increase their satisfaction.
What lights you up about this?
Can you tell everything?
Can I tell? Yeah, just slightly. And I can see you. The listener can't see you.
Right. Okay. So the way I ended up doing this was I had finished teaching law for a semester. I taught law for a small period of time, and I had the semester off, and I thought, like, okay, I know I have not found my calling yet. I'm doing medicine, but I do not love. It's not my passion. I had done some work in politics. I was like a Bernie Sanders delegate, and I had taught law, and I thought teaching law would be my thing. And I'm like, okay, I like these things, but this is not clearly my calling. And I decided, and I wrote on 2 pieces of paper. I was like, what am I good at? And what do I like to do? And the top of what I was good at was like public speaking and giving advice. And like what I was good at, the top thing was quitting. And I just like, maybe I should put these together. And then once I started doing that, and just like any imposter syndrome I had from anything else was just gone. Like, like I'm in a situation where you're asking me questions that I've not heard of before. And that
good.
Yeah. Like, because I haven't, like you don't send me the questions beforehand, except for like one, and so most of these, like in a situation where almost any of my other careers, I would be having like imposter syndrome moments, like, because I have frankly, I have too many careers, like doctor and a lawyer.
Join the club.
Yeah. Right. Like, people are like asking me about how to treat a flu and how do you file a restraining order. And I'm like, why did I get so many degrees? Like, I just cannot keep all this information in my head. But man, you ask me about quitting, I will talk all day. So
that's
fantastic. I don't even remember your question.
My question was what lights you up? But I think you've answered it. This whole thing does.
Indeed, it does.
That's fabulous. Well, Lynn Marie, where can people find you if they want to know more about what you're doing now at this moment?
Well, I hear that this episode is coming out on my birthday, September 13th.
Woohoo! Happy birthday!
Woohoo! Yay! But 2 weeks after that, about 2 weeks, on September 28th, my book comes out, and it's called Quitting by Design.
Fabulous.
And you can find out about that on quittingbydesign.com. That's also the same place you can find my podcast, which is called Quit Happens, which is also on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. You can put in Quit Happens. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram as Quitting by Design. And if you want to join the Facebook group, the like humble haven for all things strategic quitting, that's called Quitopia. And come on over. I'll let you answer one question and then you get into Quitopia, and then we do some Facebook Lives and that kind of thing. So you can find me any and all of the above.
That sounds like fun. So we'll put all that in the show notes at careersbyjen.com. And before I let you go, I want to hear one last piece of advice.
Dear everybody listening to this podcast, do not settle. There are greener pastures out there, and the career advice of the 1950s is not the career advice of the 2000 teens and forward. You can move careers. There's no gold medal for sticking at a career for 20 years. Like you used to get the paperweight or whatever the prize was if you stuck at
gold
the
watch. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like if there is that, buy your own gold watch, like do not stay somewhere 30 years. There's no prize for that. The prize is when you go to your final days and you look back with no regrets. That's what you're aiming for. That's the only thing that matters, is how you can judge your life at the end of it.
This has been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jen. This is amazing.
You've been listening to Careers by Jen with Jen Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.